Lesson 36. Eating disorders. Causes of eating disorders and anorexia nervosa. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify the most common forms of eating disorders, identify the characteristics of people with an eating disorder, and describe the relationship between body image and the development of an eating disorder, and define and identify the characteristics, symptoms, and possible health consequences of anorexia nervosa. The term eating disorder refers to a group of conditions that's characterized by severe disturbances in eating, emotional and psychological distress, and as a result of that, physical consequences. Eating disorders are complex, life-threatening conditions from which people can and do recover with appropriate treatment. While they're usually associated with young women, eating disorders can affect anyone of any age and of both sexes. An eating disorder is very often used as a coping mechanism which the person relies on to deal with underlying emotions or issues that they cannot otherwise find a way of dealing with. The eating disorder gives them a sense of control where their life might feel out of control, and the emotional and psychological aspects of an eating disorder then need to be dealt with for the person to fully move on from that behaviour. There is no single factor which causes eating disorders to develop. They could develop in response to an upset in a person's life, for example, a traumatic event, or loss or stress, or bullying, or maybe critical comments about weight or shape. There are also powerful societal pressures by the fashion and advertising industry for both men and women to conform to prescribed body shapes and sizes which are considered to be ideal. These pressures themselves do not necessarily cause eating disorders, but they can lead to body dissatisfaction and a lowering of self-esteem. So people with low self-esteem may also be more vulnerable. Another condition that is also closely associated with the development of eating disorders is a condition called body dysmorphic disorder. Body dysmorphic disorder, also known as body image distortion, is a mental disorder in which the person can't stop thinking about one or more perceived flaw. They obsess about their appearance and body image. They have an unrealistic view of themselves. They repeatedly check the mirror, strongly believe that they are either ugly or deformed. They constantly seek reassurance from others about their physical appearance, while at the same time believing that others notice their appearance in a negative way. And because of that, then it causes them to avoid social situations. A person with body dysmorphic disorder will typically believe that they are bigger than they actually are, or fatter than they actually are. However, another form of body dysmorphia has recently been categorized, and this is called muscle dysmorphia. And in this condition, a person obsesses about the size of their muscle and believes that it isn't big enough. And this condition is more likely to affect men. So while eating disorders are often observed in young women attempting to maintain or achieve an unrealistic weight, they are becoming more common in men. They can begin as simply calorie counting, but they can escalate to self-induced vomiting and laxative abuse, and that in turn then can develop into a clinical eating disorder. People experiencing an eating disorder share many of the following features: a history of dieting, low self-esteem, marked over-concern with body weight, shape and size, and an obsession with food. Thinness is seen as a magical solution to problems, while weight gain is feared. They may have difficulty identifying and expressing needs, and they may suffer from distorted body image and perceive their body as larger than it actually is. They may have problems around control in their normal daily life, and they may have difficulty talking about feelings and dealing with conflict. They may suffer from depression and withdrawal from contact with others. Disordered eating can take various forms, from fasting or self-starvation to consuming quantities of food well beyond what the body needs to satisfy its hunger, which is what we call binging. It may involve excessive exercising or self-induced vomiting. The use of laxatives or diuretics can all be used to avoid weight gain. All of these behaviours, sustained over time, will have a serious effect on both physical and emotional health. The Eating Disorders Association of Ireland, Bodywise, identified 3 main conditions in their annual report 2014. Of the calls to their helpline, 60% suffered from anorexia nervosa, 17% from bulimia nervosa, and 18% from binge eating disorder. The remaining 5% was a mixture of a number of different types of eating disorder that could not be classified as any of the previous 3. Amongst this 5% is an increasingly common condition known as exercise bulimia, which affects both men and women equally. So what exactly is anorexia nervosa? Anorexia nervosa is an eating disorder characterised by the deliberate refusal to eat enough to maintain a normal body weight. As a result, both the body and the mind are starved of the nutrients needed for healthy, balanced functioning. Though anorexia is a serious illness, it can be fatal. Full recovery is also possible. Restriction of food intake often begins with the gradual elimination of high-calorie foods from the diet. There may be a sudden preference for a vegetarian diet, and at first this can resemble a normal diet or lifestyle choice, but the relentless drive behind the behaviour becomes more and more obvious as the disorder progresses. Other means then of maintaining low body weight might include fasting, excessive exercise, self-induced vomiting, the use of laxatives, diuretics, or appetite suppressants. The characteristics of anorexia nervosa include the restriction of food intake, an intense fear of putting on weight, and this fear is not lessened by weight loss, a preoccupation with body weight, size and shape. Self-evaluation and self-esteem become increasingly linked to these. Perception of body shape and size are disturbed. Disruption of hormonal balance. And in women and adolescent girls, the menstrual cycle is upset and periods become irregular and eventually cease, which is a condition called amenorrhea. In men, there can be a loss of libido, and in pre-pubertal children, growth can be disrupted and sexual development can be delayed. Physiological symptoms of anorexia nervosa. Overactivity and excessive exercising. Poor circulation. Bloating of the stomach and fluid retention. Constipation and abdominal pain. Restlessness, inability to settle. Difficulty sleeping and tiredness, loss of periods, and decreased interest in sex. Psychological and social symptoms of anorexia nervosa include low self-esteem, irritability and mood swings, difficulty resolving conflict, social isolation, difficulty coping with change and frustration, inflexible black or white, right or wrong thinking, depression, and obsessive and or compulsive behaviour. Their attitude towards food is very rigid, very limited diet, frequent weighing both of the food that they eat as well as themselves, lying about food intake, chasing food around the plate and taking a long time over eating meals, increased consumption of fluids, and episodes of binging or perceived overeating, and secret disposal of food. The possible health consequences of anorexia nervosa: dehydration, which can lead to a risk of kidney failure; muscle weakness and atrophy; tiredness and overall weakness, which can lead to a risk of fainting; abnormally slow heart rate and low blood pressure produces changes in the heart muscle, so there's an increased risk of heart failure; loss of bone density, resulting in dry, brittle bones or osteoporosis, and this also leads to the risk of postural problems and a higher risk of fracture.